So I think it's very important, not only for the security, but to show Bitcoiners that we are trying to decentralize the bridge. We will decentralize the bridge using BitVMX, basically. And I think we will be even more aligned with Bitcoin.
All right, Sergio, thank you so much for being here. This is our first time meeting at DevConnect in Buenos Aires, where you're from this week.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this conversation. So to be fair, I didn't know that much about what BitVMX was up to until I came here this week, even though I've done, a fair amount of layman research in the BitVM space leading up to this week. And it was really interesting to learn more about you guys. There were 3 separate kind of major figures in the space that this week told me that they think Fairgate, which is your company, is, quote, the most underrated company in BitVM.
Wow.
This was multiple people I am directly quoting, which was a pretty interesting commentary. And yeah, there's a lot of unique things going on with Fairgate that we'll get into, but also you're the creator or co-creator of Rootstock.
Yes,
which
that's
is
right.
Also,
I wrote the white paper.
You wrote the white paper for Rootstock, which is also pretty relevant history for the show. We cover a lot of scaling layer 2 topics over here. So I'm excited to kind of dive into all of this relevant history. You have a pretty unique perspective that we're going to get into.
Happy to recall all the past moments.
Exactly. I think this is going to be a good one. So, but I think, I typically like to start the show by just asking folks how they got into Bitcoin and kind of what your early background was. You were very, very early to the Bitcoin show.
I had two approaches to Bitcoin. My background is in computer security. In 2008, I think, I was researching for my thesis about peer-to-peer poker. So how can people around the globe play poker without disclosing their strategy and in a completely confidential way? So I actually implemented the whole thing, and when I tried to sell it to someone, like maybe online casinos would to increase their security and they didn't want anything like this, right?
They didn't want it because they just didn't understand cryptography, or what was the...
more like they still want to have full control. Even if at that time there was a very well-known theft from an internal employee who had some access to the cards of the other players and had been, cheating in an online site. So I thought maybe this is something like online casinos may want. But actually, to implement a decentralized platform for gaming or for playing, it requires completely redoing your whole infrastructure. It's a completely different way of doing the stuff. So they didn't.
Makes sense.
So I said, okay, the only way I can do this in practice and put it on the hands of the public is having a cryptocurrency, having some sort of anonymous coin that people can use to bet.
But this was before Bitcoin even happened.
This was before Bitcoin. So at that time, I was in cryptography mailing list, pinging people, trying to see, hey, who's doing who's doing tokens or
digital currency stuff.
Yeah, digital currency, but we didn't call it digital currency. We'd call more like eCash, right?
Right.
And who's working on anonymous eCash, and I throw some ideas, but there was nothing like you could just take. Bitcoin didn't exist. So, I say, I just paused the project. I didn't launch it as a platform. And several years later, and I think it was 2012, a friend of mine pinged me, and I think it's on Twitter, and told me, hey, have you looked at Bitcoin? And this was about 2012. This is going to work for your peer-to-peer poker system.
Wow.
And I say, okay, well, this is amazing. I was thrilled. I remember looking at the code and thinking, wow, this is fantastic. But at the same time, I tried to see how I would implement the poker games on top of Bitcoin. I would say it's impossible because the scripting language is too restricted, right? So right from the beginning, I really wanted to expand the functionality of Bitcoin. So that was in my mind all the time.
Interesting. Right from 2012, you were like, were you thinking like the script itself should expand, or were you thinking in layers at that point?
At that time, in Bitcoin Talk forums, people really thought like we could, improve the system, adding more capabilities, or maybe loops, or maybe introspection, or a lot of things required to implement these games.
On layer one, directly.
On layer one, because, it was not solidified, it was not ossified. Like these discussions happen very frequently on Bitcoin Talk. And that's why I thought, okay, but still there's this limitation of the block size and everything. And so very early, I did two things related to that. First, I created the first Turing-Complete cryptocurrency or platform.
Really?
It was 2013.
What was that called?
It was called Quixcoin.
Quixcoin.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, it had Turing-Complete smart contracts. The only contracts that I actually built were contracts to play poker, because that's what I wanted,
that was your
right?
use case.
I have no idea of the financial use cases of Bitcoin. Like, for me, learning about the philosophy of Bitcoin, the ethos of Bitcoin, the idea that Bitcoin would change society for good, came much, much later. So in the beginning, it was just, I want my poker system to be used, and so that's also a reason why in 2014, when Vitalik launched Ethereum, he came to me, actually my company at that time, to help him to design Ethereum based on the ideas that I had already deployed in Quixcoin.
Interesting.
Yeah, so,
I was going to ask you, because my understanding is that you have core contributions, Bitcoin core contributions, but then also Ethereum contributions.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm from the beginning, I was more like a Bitcoin maximalist in maybe monetary maximalism. I never launched a coin, an altcoin. That was the way, of course, we called them, because I wanted to contribute to Bitcoin. But at the same time, I saw very early that the technology was the improvements and the new ideas were happening in some other place. So I wanted to bring those ideas into Bitcoin. And for that, I needed to fully understand the capabilities of these new ideas. That, for instance, zero-knowledge proofs of succinct, proof of program integrity, computation, and that came much later.
When you say, it wasn't until much later that I understood the ethos of Bitcoin, et cetera, I assume like the hard money property values of Bitcoin came later. What was the original aha moment of Bitcoin for you? Like what was the value that you did see in it right off the bat?
Yeah. So initially it was just the internet money. Like we thought much more about Bitcoin as a payment system, like that's Bitcoin as a store of value.
Most people at that time.
Yeah. Maybe there are some visionaries in the beginning that wanted to save their Bitcoins, but everybody that had some Bitcoin, they just spend them. Like I don't have Bitcoins from those times. I just, you would spend them or give them as a gift, right? It was not really, the mentality we have today on Bitcoin. So yeah, and I think my much later in 2015 when I met Dieguito Saldívar, one of the co-founders of Rootstock, and Gabriel Kurman, and they were very much into Gabi was more into the financial side of Bitcoin, and very much, he's an economist, and Dieguito, one of the co-founders of the Latin American Bitcoin community and the LabitConf conference. He was very focused on generating a local community around Bitcoin. So they gave me these ideas that Bitcoin was actually a tool to change society, and not just a game of computer science or cryptography, which was that was for me until that moment.
That makes sense. So 2015 is when the Rootstock paper was originally written.
Yes.
At that point, was the sidechains, like the Blockstream, Atom Back sidechains original paper out already?
Yeah, that paper was out in 2014. Okay. And it's very interesting what happened. Like, because my ideas with Quixcoin that predates 1 year, the sidechains paper, and I was very interested in this paper. Like, for me, it was like fundamental. Everyone was very amazed. Like, we could really create this layer 2 on top of Bitcoin. But I think the story and the untold story is like they wrote the paper and they realized that there was no way they could avoid giving Bitcoin miners more responsibilities. Or I would say they found an impossibility result, an actual mathematical result, and that implied that to really implement a fully trustless bridge to a layer 2, another blockchain without a synchronous assumption, like a completely separate blockchain, you would need to put more trust on the Bitcoin miners. And when they realized that, because Bitcoin miners can censor transactions, 51% of the Bitcoin miners could potentially censor transactions, they realized they didn't want this for Bitcoin.
Oh, really?
So they finished the paper. This is my theory, but I think it's shared among many people. So they did this amazing work with the paper, and they decided not to pursue it any longer. Like they just let it fall, right?
Interesting.
Because they thought, okay, this is not what we want, but the technology was sound. But, and this impossibility result was actually verified or codified in a paper several years later by Alexei Samyatin. It's an impossibility result where it says that either you have a synchronicity assumption, like both blockchains are either synchronized, like in a sense, maybe like a rollup, or, some way synchronized on an overlay system, or there are some collateral that is protecting the bridge, which makes the bridges very inefficient, or you have to trust the 51% of the miners or the block producers that they are not going to censor transactions. And then you can create fraud systems. So that impossibility result is very strong. And, we have to live with that. We have to find the best possible bridge with that restrictions.
So just for clarity, so how exactly would the miners need to take on more responsibility? Is this through like merge mining specifically are you referencing, or is this something else?
Maybe here, responsibility is not the word. The thing is like in any fraud-proof system where you can have a proof and a contest period or a challenge period where others can prove, some other statement.
And that's what they were originally proposing in the original sidechains paper. They wanted to use a proof system to bridge, essentially.
Yeah, so the original Blockstream paper had this op reorg proof where you will bring a proof of a sidechain, let's say, proving that there has been some burn Bitcoins on the sidechain, so you can unlock them on the main chain again. But then some other people could come and say, okay, I have a longer or a proof with more cumulative work, which means that fork that you have put on chain is not the honest one, the canonical one. So this is longer, so this is the right one, and that would invalidate the burn and the unlock of coins. So this it's called a fraud-proof system or a verification game where someone puts some proof and the other can contradict that proof with a counterproof. And that requires that the miner do not censor transactions. If there is a possibility that the miners could 51% of the money that could censor transactions, then that does not work.
What was the concern? I mean, because 51% attacks are theoretically a concern on layer 1 as well. Why was the concern greater for an L2 than for an L1?
Because in the case of a typical double spend attack, you have to have the Bitcoins to double spend them. Like if a miner wants to really double spend, they have to first have their Bitcoins and then try to double spend them. They cannot just take other person's Bitcoins, right? And that puts them in a high risk. Like if something goes wrong, they might lose their Bitcoin. The community may somehow fork the chain to prevent the attack, or they can lose all the investment in infrastructure. There's a lot of risk. In the case of a breach, this is third-party money that you can eventually take if you collude with one of these operators or one of the functionaries of these fraud-proof systems.
Right.
And so basically you take other people's money.
It's a honeypot, basically.
Yeah. So you create greater, the bigger the pot, the bigger the money that moves to layers 2s, the bigger the pot is.
So the challenge was that the transactions that are moving between these layers would be so large that the incentive would be greater to execute a 51% attack.
I think the perspective now is different. I think we think now that with long challenge period, that attack will never happen. There is a deterrent, like it's a mutual assured destruction deterrent, that if they try to censor transaction for, let's say, a week or several weeks, then people will notice for sure, and something very bad will happen. So we know there are currently incentives that prevent that from happening. But in 2014, this was not so clear.
Because there were fewer miners, so centralization risk was higher.
There had been cases of very high centralization in certain mining pools, more than 40 something, like 45 or something at certain points in time, controlled by a single.
Oh, really? When was the last time we got that close, right? I mean, because right now I think maybe the most is like 20 something on paper, but who knows? There might be.
Yeah, probably. But now that obviously we know better than some workers, some miners will, if there is an attack, this will disengage with that pool and will just mine their own blocks or engage with some other pools. So now we know more about the dynamics of the mining system.
I think you mentioned this. This was when we very first met at the Fairgate event a couple days ago. This is what you were, I think, trying to explain to me, and I was trying to understand it.
Maybe,
and you were sharing that this may still be a concern for...
If the challenge periods are not chosen with taking in consideration not only the particular risk of a chain or a sidechain, but the aggregated risk of many chains, all, offering the same, contributing to the same pot. So if I want to make the perfect attack, I would just try to attack all of them at the same time during the same challenge window. I would generate the conditions so I can steal from everyone together. Right.
So you'd have to collude with several operaters together.
Yeah,
it would be a very sophisticated attack, but could be done.
Yeah, but that's the problem. So I many times in the past I thought about maybe there should be a protocol to coordinate this among the different layer 2s, like these layer 2s that may use fraud system. Maybe there is a way to announce that you are going to expect certain amount of block confirmation so that the attack that everyone, is simultaneously having their challenge window can be, somehow detected in advance.
Is miner centralization risk in general something that, you're fairly concerned about right now?
Yes,
I mean, this
always.
is something that is like a key thing.
It's the key.
This is the key.
It has always
the
been
biggest
like
risk.
The biggest risk for Bitcoin is mining centralization. It has always been. Like the whole idea of Bitcoin is not trusting a third party. And if you have only 5 or 2 or 3 parties that can eventually do some harm to the network, then it might be not them. They might be hacked. So it's the same. The problem is this single point of failure. Not that they may be malicious, but they may be attacked.
Right. They could be held at gunpoint. There's all sorts of things that can happen. Yes. Who knows? So are you bullish? And we're getting a little off topic. I'm going to bring us back in a second. But out of curiosity, are you bullish on like Stratum v2 and these sort of like decentralization technologies? What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I'm totally bullish. I know that incentives do not play in the favor of the miner investing in creating their own blocks, because the best possible from the economics perspective, on the economical scale, is having a company making the perfect choice of transactions, having great connectivity to choose, to detect, to make private deals with
and I think you may know that I work with Mara right now on Slipstream, which is a private mempool, right?
Yeah, we don't want that.
Right, well,
yeah, but it's okay. It's a part of the incentives.
They're doing the economically rational thing that's in there. That makes sense for them. But to your point, right? Yes. Like their miners on some level should. They are supposed to make economically rational decisions. They are supposed to act on economic incentives alone. That's sort of the point.
So I think it's a great example of what we could do to improve decentralization, making sure that the miners in the edge can choose their own block templates, and that the block templates are as good in terms of profitability as, that what can be produced by centralized.
Right. Can we help, if we do have, kind of randomly selected block template generation in pools, where anyone who hits a block who's contributing to a pool can make their own templates. How can we do it in a way that they don't screw it up, right? Basically.
Yeah. So there is a lot of incentive engineering with that, but essentially, let's say if you give this is while there is a huge subsidy as it is today, if you give this transaction fees to the one who finds the block, then that's enough for him to have a high incentive of finding the best possible
Right.
collection of transactions to put on the block, and then the subsidy can be distributed among all the participants. But I'm not expert in the mining.
That's a whole other rabbit hole. But just was curious. So we'll circle back now. So the proof systems that were originally being proposed in the sort of original Sidechains paper by Adam Back and Matt Corallo and all these folks, did that involve a soft fork? Was there a
yes,
it
yes.
did. What would you know? What was it, like a specific opcode that they were proposing?
Well, it was this opcode op reorg proof, I think it was called.
Okay.
Yes.
And did that gain any steam? Was there meaningful campaigning around that?
No, because they just stopped working on it as they immediately after they published the paper.
Really?
I don't think there's. I mean, then the Elements code base and the federated setup came with after that. Liquid, I think it was created, but no, there was no more developments on there. As far as I know, no more developments on that particular opcode from their side.
I had understood, and maybe I'm getting this wrong, I'd be curious to hear your version of events, but my understanding was that the reason why people started moving towards the federated bridge model was because, these opcodes were not going to happen, or that there was, politically unfeasible to push this opcode through.
No, I don't think that. This was prior the block size wars. People were still very optimistic about upgrading Bitcoin in several ways.
Okay.
And the mess came later.
So it was more this issue of people were concerned about minor centralization risks with just even having these sort of proof systems between layers. And then, the federated bridge doesn't solve that problem. So who ended up proposing federated bridges? You guys, I think, executed the first federated bridge, but was that your invention, or were there other people involved?
It's so simple that I don't think there is someone who invented
it's just obvious.
Yeah. It's kind of obvious, yes.
It's obvious. Okay. So then that paper came out in 2014. You wrote the Rootstock paper in 2015. You wrote the Rootstock paper with EVM. So it was the point of it originally was to have an EVM layer bridged into Bitcoin.
So
was that heretical at the time? Tell me about that decision.
Totally. But the thing is I do computer science. I study computer science, and we all know that any Turing-Complete can, emulate any other Turing-Complete. So for me, it was okay. We can have several execution environments. It's not so important to bring at the beginning to have the best possible execution environments. Like, let's make one that at least has some security assurances. We don't want something that completely breaks, and bring the developers on board. And we saw very early that developers were the solidity was gaining traction.
Right.
And EVM, it's just one of many possible virtual machines. It's not the best, not the worst. Yeah, just one.
Right.
And so,
but many developers use it, and I think that's still true today. There are several. Most of these roll-up companies, and we'll kind of get into this as the conversation go on, are still choosing to implement.
Yeah, but they choose EVM not because the EVM itself have some magical property.
Right.
You cannot, for instance, create formal proofs directly on EVM, but they choose because there's a lot of tooling, a lot of experience, and a lot of programmers that love it.
Right. Well, there's a lot of programmers who know how to use it, right? Like so many, there's just seemingly infinite numbers of Solidity developers out there.
So, for instance, the Rootstock blockchain had something that Ethereum didn't have, is a header in each contract where you can specify actually the execution environment of your contract. So, because we thought it was
specific to just the one EVM.
It wasn't tied to the EVM. We thought, okay, we will start with EVM. For us, at that time, Java was still kind of open, kind of well considered by the developer community. We thought, well, maybe later we can do bytecode. Directly code contracts in Java bytecode, and that would make it faster. So we left the possibility to expand it to different runtimes. But EVM gained so much popularity that at a certain point, it was the difference in performance was not so important.
Minimal.
Because the bottleneck in all these blockchains is the I/O, like the state of the contract. So only recently there has been more effort trying to improve the computing capabilities of the blockchains, because there is a lot of cryptography coming into the blockchains in zero-knowledge proofs. But at the beginning, it was a lot of I/O, lot less computation. So EVM was quite good.
So if the original idea of Rootstock and the Rootstock paper was basically, the development of a sidechain with a federated bridge that could potentially plug into any variety of execution environments, EVM Rootstock was the one that ultimately took off. But if that was what the original paper was authoring, was saying, then what was the core difference between the Rootstock paper and the original sidechains paper other than the federated bridge?
Well, I think we studied Rootstock because we saw that there was no life, no continuation of the blockchain.
You wanted to push that same idea forward.
Yeah, and there was when I met Diego and Gabriel and Adrian, we all came to we were discussing and we thought, okay. We came from Argentina, and hyperinflation here was kind of a cyclic event. Like every 5-10 years, we have these hyperinflation events, and banks will take the money of the people and create barriers for you to use your money. Dollars were forbidden, and then you will have to hide your dollars somewhere, and then you will have problems with your security. And this is how we used to live.
Very tied to the core problem.
Yes. So for us, it was no-brainer that an open financial system based on Bitcoin as the main collateral and together connected with fiat currencies for trading and buying stuff of everyday stuff, but connected with your savings in Bitcoin was kind of the ideal model.
That's
something that we will use ourselves, not something that we will let's try to find someone who needs it. This was something that we would have used if it was present at the time.
But so are you saying then that it wasn't necessarily scaling Bitcoin that was the goal, but the ability to trustlessly exchange stables in Bitcoin, essentially?
Totally. I mean, we thought we were thinking about an open financial system where everything was collateralized in Bitcoin. That was our original idea. It was, obviously payments was an important part of it. We wanted to, but it was not the only thing. The main thing was bringing billions of people on board to the Bitcoin economy.
And to a permissionless system.
Yeah, permissionless system, and let them sell their talent, sell their work to the global world. And in Argentina, we had a lot of capital controls. You could not even work for an outside company because you could not receive dollars, or the government will trade your dollar for cheap pesos at a very bad rate.
Oof, that's awful.
So it was not possible. So this is our real needs of the common people.
Wow, that's amazing. How prevalent were stables at that time in 2015? I mean, I guess Omni may already have existed at that point, which was the precursor to Tether.
There was this chain that doesn't exist now that created the first stable coins. I don't remember the name, but what... I will remember.
Were they proper treasury-backed stable coins? I mean, stable coins back then must have been the Wild West.
There was one project that introduced collateralized stable coins, but it was not using general purpose contracts. They would have their own specific code like that with Latimer. This is the surname of the guy, but I will recall it.
We'll link to it. Yeah. We'll figure it out and we'll link to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So someone there will Google it. Latimer.
So there weren't stables. I mean, were there stables? I mean, okay. So again, just to place us in history here. So stables is a conversation that's happening. There's maybe a couple early players in the stables world at that point. Mm-hmm. Ethereum is nascent. I mean, when did Ethereum pop off? When was the Ethereum paper written? Maybe probably around this time, 2014.
Yeah, 2014. Yes.
Okay, so Ethereum is a baby. There's definitely no stables being used on EVM at this time. So these were infant ideas at the moment.
Yes.
And but your vision was we need a place to trustlessly execute smart contracts. Have people be able to interact between stables and Bitcoin in one permissionless system.
But it was not my vision. It was the founder's vision. Every
the
single
group of you.
Yeah. I think
the Argentine Bitcoiners community.
Yes, more like that. Yes.
Interesting.
I mean, if you are going to, you cannot convince anyone at that time, and probably not at this time, to buy Bitcoin first, it has to get used to the technology, the way wallets, crypto wallets work, and maybe they first have some fiat denominated tokens and stables, and then they move ahead and they buy a little bit of Bitcoin.
Were you concerned about UX? When you're thinking about the average Argentinian civilian,
yes.
using this
yes,
for real
totally.
needs.
Yes, I remember we did very early experiments with wallets in very poor places in slums in Argentina. There were some experiments we did trying to see how hard it was for poor people to adopt this technology.
How those experiments go?
Yeah, I don't remember. But we did them.
Were they roughly positive or were they roughly challenging?
We took a lot of notes of the hard. There was obviously, it was very hard for them to remember the
private
words.
Keys.
Yeah, private keys and all. Like the early times were.
Was the BIP? I forget. Were there Spanish seed phrases at that time?
I don't remember.
I
don't remember.
Because I know this is also a barrier. This potentially could be a barrier. English seed phrases don't work necessarily all around the world. But yeah, interesting. Okay, so that's some really critical work, I think, that you contributed. What was the broad sort of response that you got to this paper? And, how did people accept this paper?
So we had two types of two kinds of people. I think locally we had a lot of support. Globally, I remember Nick Szabo tweeting about us, like, look at these guys are doing. This is the perfect combination between Bitcoin and smart contracts. So
that's positive.
Yes. And also we had initial investment, like in very short time, we raised some money to start working on the idea. So that part was perfect. But Maxis
didn't like it.
They would never like it. Like bringing foreign technology, that it was not the most secure VM.
Was EVM the problem? Were stables the problem for the Maxis?
No. I think EVM was a blocker for many. Like they would not, and some people,
they just had an allergic reaction to the words EVM.
And some people still thought that a blockchain cannot scale a blockchain, which has some ground,
that has
right?
some fair. There's something to be said for that.
But what it doesn't take into consideration that position is like you can have a secondary blockchain that you can spend a lot of time optimizing things, shrinking the size of transactions, so that actually with the same space or the same resources you can get 10 to 100 times the volume, the transactional volume. And we know now that it can be done. Like, for instance, if you take as an example, the UTXO model is very good for parallelization, like for connecting them and advancing the state of the blockchain. But it takes a lot of space.
Yeah.
Where in Rootstock, like this, with the same size, you can fit 5 or 10 Bitcoin transactions.
Right. Makes sense.
And if you could, like, one of the ideas that is written in the early Rootstock paper is a technology we call shrinking chain scaling, where you basically could define some templates for your own transactions and actually fit the minimum amount of data that would allow you to publish your transaction and sign and even remove the signature of your transaction, that you would sign every past transaction with a single signature. So you would update your signature, and basically you could have transaction that took 10 bytes. So the scaling would be like 50 times. So I think, like, and with aggregation, zero knowledge proof and aggregation, you can do even more. So I think that, a blockchain can scale a blockchain, because the first blockchain you want this to be, very transparent, auditable, and ossified. And then the second one, you let,
way later.
Yeah.
Wait,
other trust minimization trade-off. You may accept some trade-offs there.
Well, so this was going to be my next question, is like, what was the broad response when people were when federated bridges kind of came onto the scene? Because again, the original vision was this, opcode that would enable actual trustless bridging. Then people started using these multi-sigs. Was there like immediate backlash to that or concern about the federated bridges, or was that broadly just accepted at the time?
No. I think the federated bridges were like, most Bitcoin was simply not interested in using them. they would prefer using custodial centralized exchanges than think about, having a federation of 20 parties all around the world under different jurisdictions without a single one controlling everything like we built and like we Liquid also built.
Because a proper custodial solution at least has like a qualified custodian or whatever. Was that the argument?
It's not a good argument. Like if you're pushing people into centralized exchanges or centralized financial systems, like lending and borrowing centralized companies, and because you don't like a 20 functionary federation, it makes no sense. It makes no sense.
But so why do you think that people had this nonsensical, like, again, allergic reaction, I guess maybe is the word, to federated bridges?
Because maybe they only touch the exchanges when they want to go in or out. Yes, like they use it and then they easily get out. But KYC, like you are putting your fingerprint. So you want Bitcoin to be pseudonymous and all these nice properties, cypherpunk properties, but then you go to a centralized exchange, you leave your fingerprint, and now all your pseudonymity is gone.
It's interesting you mentioned KYC, though, because a lot of federated bridges, actually do KYC their users, because again, since they are centralized, entities that are running these multi-sigs, they can also get the gun pointed to their head to kind of require them to KYC their users. Was that a thing for you guys?
Well, yeah. I'm not a lawyer, so my understanding is mostly technical, but one of the properties when I designed Rootstock, I wanted to be in the bridge part as transparent and auditable as possible. So the pegging into Rootstock is a fully autonomous procedure. Like you can do it yourself. You have to make a transaction on Bitcoin, then inform that transaction to a specific smart contract on Rootstock. But you don't need help from anyone. So nobody can, claim anything because it's your own responsibility. You can be helped, but you don't need that help. So there's no involvement of third party in that part because Rootstock has a Bitcoin-like client built into it, like in consensus. So I think it's just the only long-lasting autonomous system verifying Bitcoin blocks since 2018. Like
that. That is my understanding from the research that I've done.
But let me. The other part, the pegging out, you need some help, right? Because you have these functionaries, we call them pegnatories, that are somehow involved in this peg out operation. So we made sure that you can only peg out to an address that you also control. You cannot make payments in the pegging out. So you have if you control a certain account in Rootstock and you want to peg out, you are going to peg out to an address in Bitcoin that is controlled by the same or a derived key from that same key.
Right.
So essentially, it's you transferring funds to you. So that clears a lot of potential problems. We never had, as far as any kind of problem, but that makes sure that it's your money and you are transferring to you. And the other thing we did is we didn't want any involvement of the pegnatories in any governance. Like they just need to run something,
right?
And so we created these HSMs models that they run like clients, Rootstock-like clients, inside the firmware of the security element, the secure element.
Okay.
That is tamper-proof. So basically, the only way that you can make that specific HSM sign a payout transaction is by giving them huge amount of cumulative work that is held by Rootstock.
Interesting.
So if Rootstock commands, the blockchain commands for a payout, then you collect a lot of work, like days of Bitcoin work.
Interesting.
Equivalent to days of Bitcoin work. And that you have to give that to the HSM. And then the HSM will sign.
Makes sense.
So even if all the pegnatories decided, to collude, they wouldn't be able to peg out to a specific address or anything. They might just shut down the boxes, right? But this is the worst damage they can do.
So there's some sort of security backstops there, basically.
Yeah, I haven't seen. This is a kind of bragging, but I haven't seen it as more secure system than that system. And we are going to replace it with something better. But
until BitVM / BitVMX, etc., which we'll get into. All right, guys, I want to take a quick break to thank you for watching and remind you to click the follow button on my profile if you want more Bitcoin technical deep dives like this. I also want to give a shout out to my partners for making the show possible. My leading partner, Best in Slot, just released the programmability module for BRC20, making the execution of smart contracts possible for the protocol. I know that's been long awaited by the BRC20 community. Alongside this release, Best in Slot put out what is arguably the most sophisticated DEX for trading Bitcoin native assets called Coin Cooker, which I also highly recommend checking out if you want to dive into the BRC20 trading game and get started executing smart contracts on Bitcoin. I'd also like to thank Citrea, building one of the leading implementations of a BitVM-style bridge for Bitcoin. Citrea is building what I think could become the canonical Bitcoin rollup, enabling programmability, scaling. Really anything is possible with a trust minimized bridge, which is the unique value prop of these BitVM-style rollups on Bitcoin. Lastly, I'm thrilled to announce my newest partner, Spark, which is the leading state chains protocol on Bitcoin. State chains builds upon what was made possible by the Lightning Network for payments, but without the liquidity constraints and the UX challenges that often make self-custodial Lightning impractical. Spark is also led by one of the leading payments infrastructure teams on the planet, including founders from PayPal, Facebook. They're incredibly well positioned to turn Bitcoin into a true institutional standard for payment systems around the world, and I couldn't be more excited to support what they're up to. All right, on that note, let's get back to the show. But so I'm curious. So the maxis had this sort of allergy to EVM, allergy to federated bridges. Who were the users of Rootstock? Were they people coming from the Ethereum ecosystem? Like, who are the Rootstock users? Especially at that time, what was the canonical? Well, what were the characteristics of Rootstock users?
I think like average Argentinians, and then expanded into LATAM, into different.
Oh, it was very LATAM driven.
Yeah, I think at the beginning, yes, totally.
Interesting. And they were using it mostly for stables, mostly for this vision?
The stable protocol came kind of year later. So the first, and still the main stable protocol on Rootstock is money on chain. That allows you to create the dollar on chain token collateralized with Bitcoin. And it's been working since, 2018 or it's more like 2020 probably. My memory fails at that point. But yeah, it was not the original use case. The original use case was more like transacting in Bitcoin, like Bitcoin payments.
Interesting. Okay, so just straight up scaling, basically.
But you have to think about like the you see now a lot of L2s popping up with all the BC backing and all, and at that time it was like, I don't think neither Rootstock nor Liquid had a huge success at the beginning.
It's kind of like it's had a few. It's had some busts and booms, is my understanding.
Totally, yeah. So
and I'm curious, what do you attribute those to, those busts and booms? Like, what drives usage of Rootstock both up and down?
Yeah. Well, I think that most of the excitement on new tech moved into other chains that were not Bitcoin related. Essentially,
where was
Ethereum.
Rootstock positioned relative to like the big ICO booms and the rest of crypto? So like Ethereum, EVM, and Rootstock were happening kind of concurrently.
Ethereum was first.
Ethereum and then Rootstock, but then Rootstock was it early relative to these other big the 2017, 2018 kind of crypto boom?
Well, Rootstock was launched in 2018.
Oh, so you were part of that boom.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, one, you had all these tokens living on Ethereum, and this was before Rootstock. Then there were so many tokens, like trading becomes something. Like trading fees was high above any transaction fees. So trading fees was the main driver and the main, revenue source. So I think that
for Rootstock or for Ethereum?
For Ethereum.
For Ethereum,
I have to admit that this created, kind of a boiling thing. Like everyone wanted to trade, and I mean, I'm not a trader, and I don't think I ever trade something.
Right.
But yeah, I understand that generated all this excitement around decentralized exchanges, and so.
And the utility, just broadly speaking, was not happening on Bitcoin, and Rootstock was still very, in some ways, allied with Bitcoin, I guess you could say.
Could you repeat the question?
Well, I was going to say, like, it sounds like Rootstock was kind of brand aligned, for lack of a better word, with Bitcoin,
yes.
Whereas, Ethereum was sort of dominating utility use cases.
I mean, Rootstock was Bitcoin focused, still is very much Bitcoin aligned. And so altcoins or tokens were not a Bitcoin thing.
But there was sort of a moment where you guys had, more usage than you have today. And you would say that was like a new tech. That was just kind of, what do you attribute to that?
More users than Rootstock has today?
Yeah, that's what I read, but maybe is that not accurate?
I think we are at top.
You think you really? Okay,
yeah,
interesting.
I'm pretty sure that currently
in terms of like TVL.
Yeah, well, if you measure that on dollars, we are probably in the top. Yeah, in bitcoins, maybe we are 100 bitcoins below the maximum value.
Okay, interesting.
But yeah, I think it's been all up.
Okay, well that may be a correction that I'll take on my research.
I will
then.
Check it myself.
Yeah,
but
check it.
I don't remember a better moment for Rootstock than this.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know. So I stand corrected. So yeah. Okay. So the Ethereum boom happens. Broadly speaking, I mean, do you see the broad criticisms are Federated bridge, that's sort of potentially an issue, but maybe not. I mean, maybe people don't really care about a federated bridge. What's your sort of take on that? How much do people desire a trustless bridge, like these actual real users?
I think like we have obviously completely different users. The average user that is not a Bitcoiner and it cares about security, but maybe it has not the fully understanding of...
Right, they're not technical.
Yeah, they do not know the exact difference, but the Bitcoiners do know. And they drive this narrative. And like when they say, okay, this is part of the Bitcoin stack, like they say, okay, this is somehow a Bitcoin L2, then that brings a lot of attention and that brings a lot of people. So I think it's very important, not only for the security, but to show Bitcoiners that we are trying to decentralize the bridge. We will decentralize the bridge using BitVMX, basically. And I think we will be even more aligned with Bitcoin.
That's kind of a perfect segue for us to get into the BitVMX conversation. But before we do that, I just want to make sure that I remember to ask you. You have been a person who's been pretty outspoken about merge mining. And I believe I read that you had some criticisms of Liquid for not using merge mining. Do you stand by that? I mean, do you feel that merge mining on these second layers is really critical for the sustainability of these L2s?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what will happen in the future with a subsidy when the subsidy just goes down and
declines,
down.
Yeah.
And transaction fees are always will be capped by the Bitcoin block size, and we know that changing the Bitcoin block size is not going to happen, at least not in the next 10 years. So there will be a downtrend. If Bitcoin does not, doubles and double and double, which may, but we don't know. So I think it's important for layers to contribute back to the security budget of Bitcoin. I think it's part of, the being in the Bitcoin technological and infrastructure stack is to contribute to Bitcoin miners. And the best way to contribute, I mean, you cannot go and bribe a miner. That would be completely out of the basic idea. So it's going through mining fees, going through transaction fees, and making sure that they can use the same infrastructure, the same operations, without impacting their efficiency in Bitcoin mining and without centralization pressure. So one of the things that we make sure when we designed Rootstock was making sure that we did a lot of tests to make sure that the block time of Rootstock and the consensus system of Rootstock will not push Bitcoin miners into doing something that could be bad for Bitcoin, like, updating the templates too often, pushing new work units into the miners, or anything that could harm the Bitcoin setup.
But you don't want, revenue generation for miners to come from MEV, for instance. You want it to come from kind of like fair sources where they just continue hashing and make money.
Yeah. So MEV, first of all, is inevitable, unavoidable.
Oh, we're going to talk about this. All right. Okay.
As far as there is one consensus system that can run a Bitcoin-like client, then you can have whatever, bribe system you can build on top of that and apply it to Bitcoin.
Was this a criticism or a concern when Rootstock first came out? Were people like sounding alarm bells about MEV?
I don't think the MEV was so much important at that time. The MEV problem became much more clear. I mean, first of all, MEV was initially miner extractable value, right? Now it's called
Mevel.
Sorry. But yeah, at that time, that was just a few people were thinking about this. But as far as I understood the problem, the problem of MEV and bribes and all things that can affect the miner can occur in any other blockchain. Basically, just need kind of a bridge, I would say, an automated system that follows Bitcoin consensus. It's enough, and it's very cheap to handle that. So we should not worry about that. I mean, if we should try to make sure that Bitcoin miners are aligned in a sense of philosophically aligned with the Bitcoin network.
Do you think that MEV on Bitcoin will look like MEV on Ethereum? I mean, do you think they'll kind of match each other? How will they be different or similar?
I think that, so first of all, Bitcoin with the 10-minute blocks is not good for, trading there are many use cases.
Right, the trading use case is going to be rough.
MEV really pops up, like fronting or sandwich attacks or all of these things. Like I very much, when you have a very fast blockchain that people uses to do fast trades. And so I don't think that type of MEV is going to affect Bitcoin. So I don't know, but it's not going to be like Ethereum. Like there was a huge amount of MEV that, that people were fighting for. And then they have to, kind of separate roles of block producers and searchers for MEV and this complex system that is not really decentralized. And so I don't see that coming to Bitcoin. Okay?
Good. That's good. That's a relief, right?
Yeah, even if we had some sort of smart contracts on Bitcoin, I don't think that it's MEV the thing that, because there's too much time of this transaction to be live on the mempool to be some sort of, So
what will it look like on Bitcoin? What will MEV actually look like on Bitcoin in 50 years?
I don't know. I don't know.
We'll see.
I
guess technically we've already had some MEV in, when ordinals came onto the scene and all of these things. You could argue that these extra fees that people were making, Slipstream arguably is a form of MEV. So who knows what it'll look like.
Yeah, but Slipstream is the result of not having a policy in the mempool, in the nodes that match the block construction, all the standard rules.
So it sounds like you're team core. You're not team knots.
Totally. I mean, the standardness rules were first put to protect from unknown attacks. And mainly the first, I think it's kind of the only attack that still persists, is one that I found, is what I call this 10-minute transaction. So I found a way of creating a block that would take 10 minutes to verify, or some sort of that, using many check sigs and legacy blocks, like legacy addresses. So basically, if you can pack in a single block transactions that perform too many signature checks, because the way Bitcoin restricts the number of signature checks, basically you can create blocks that slow down the network too much. And so
that would be an example of a standardness rule that's good.
That is
like,
example,
let's not have too many signatures in a transaction, you guys. Okay.
So at this point, I would say the only things that we have to stop are the ones that could lead to these kinds of attacks. For instance, using legacy addresses with too many check sigs. So let's restrict that. And let's remove all the other restrictions. And we already know that if we remove these restrictions, people come up with fantastic ideas of things to build on top of Bitcoin.
Yeah, it opens up the design space.
And these are financial applications. This is not ordinals or,
I agree. BitVM.
Totally,
yeah, exactly.
Totally.
100% requires these kinds of, arguably, maybe not requires, but
we can also do BitVM without standard.
But it helps.
Yeah, but it could help, yes.
It helps, yeah. Okay, so noted. Really quickly before we get, again, too deep into BitVM. So on the merge mining side of things, so you've been, it's interesting. I guess we are going to start talking about BitVM right now. Most of these BitVM rollups are not going to have execution environments that merge mine. Do you see that as problematic? Most of the L2 narrative right now is not merge mining.
Well, you cannot be merge mine, but still be a rollup. And if
but do you see it as a problem that these L2s maybe are not going to be giving back revenue to the miners as much as they could?
Because if you are a rollup, you are still posting your data, like what is called the data availability.
Right.
You are still posting this data on Bitcoin.
And you think that's sufficient in terms of generating fees for miners?
Yeah, it might become one of the main sources. Like, let's say there are 10 rollups and each one is contributing with a volume of 100 transactions per second or 50. I think they may fill the block. So they may increase the transaction fees.
In a universe where 8 billion people are using these rollups, in a universe where we have hyper-Bitcoinization and mass scaling of...
And the thing that once you have a Turing-Complete platform, you can build layer 3s. You can build Lightning networks on top of them. You can build state channels on top of them. Or ARCs is on top of that. So, so I think the market will sort it out, how many of these rollup transactions will end up being on Bitcoin. That's a market thing. It's sort of, so if we are going to have 2 rollups or 10 rollups, I don't know, but that's good. The market will decide because of the scarcity of the space.
So you're not super concerned about the fact that these L2s aren't merge mining. Your point of view is that there are other ways to create revenue generation for miners.
As long as they are aligned in some sort of with Bitcoin, they still have, this single sequencer that I don't like having a single party.
Most of these rollups have centralized sequencers. Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe they later decentralize the sequencer, but at least they contribute back to and they have this amazing property of what I mentioned before of being synchronous with Bitcoin, so they don't have this problem of their breaches are, have less complexity because of that.
So let's talk about kind of your entry into BitVM. So Rootstock, is happening. You are still CTO, CSO of Rootstock.
Chief scientist.
Chief scientist at Rootstock. Still hold that role. But at some point, obviously, you started doing research external to Rootstock, maybe for the advancement of Rootstock, who knows? And I think you had mentioned that even before BitVM happened, before BitVM 1, before Robin published BitVM 1, you were already doing research on garbled circuits, the use of garbled circuits?
So we co-founded this company, Fairgate, with Johnny and Futo, Ariel Futoransky, Jonathan Altzul. We wanted to do some amazing things in privacy-enhancing technologies, PET, right? So these are homomorphic encryption, multi-party computation. So all these technologies were flourishing, and we said we have to use them. There are so many use cases for this, and some of them connected with blockchain. So we started just playing with we built a prototype using garbled circuits. We implemented a RISC-V processor on top of garbled circuits at that time, and we used that to prove security vulnerabilities and trade security vulnerabilities of smart contracts on chain in an atomic way. So the idea was you found a vulnerability and you want to trade it, and you don't think going to HackerOne or one of these platforms, they are going to pay you the right amount. So you would say, okay, I have a proof that I found this vulnerability, and if you want the key to decrypt this proof, then we can trade, we would set up the price and we can negotiate the price, and then the exchange would be automatic, atomic.
Interesting.
So we were using conditional disclosure of secrets, which is basically what we are using now with garbled secrets on top of Bitcoin. So it was exactly the same technology. It sounds
the same. I was going to say, what I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm getting this kind of directionally correct, is that instead of just proving between an execution environment and Bitcoin, it's sort of two parties proving to each other for the purpose of trading what the value is on one side or the other.
It's just one party, but the payer does not need to prove anything.
Right. But there's a receiver and a sender of these proofs. But they're two entities rather than L1 and L2. It's just two counterparties basically that are.
So yeah, the setup is very similar to Garbled circuits.
Right. Interesting. But you were playing with this. You're playing with Garbled circuits. And then, I mean, this was just sort of like a research phase for you. And then BitVM 1 drops on our laps. How was that moment for you? What was your experience of that moment?
I think we're super excited. I mean, this is, as a Bitcoiners, that we are, the three of us are Bitcoiners. So we thought, okay, let's apply all what we learned to it. Let's just put a pause on this very clever thing, but because this is much more important, right? And like I've been working on bridges since 2012. Like I think I the first time someone had this idea that one chain should validate the consensus of another chain, I think was mine on Bitcoin Talk.
You're truly a scaling OG. That's so how I might describe
it. It was
you.
A protocol called, I told you before, this was P2P TradeX. So I had this idea, and basically that's validating bridges, what they do now, with a lot of more cryptography than that, right? And so for me, it was continuously searching for the best bridge technologies since 2012 until today.
Yep.
So it was kind of a aha moment, like, oh, this is gonna bring a lot of value. This is gonna bring a lot of new projects, a lot of L2s, a lot of
new research.
So we just put a pause on that and say, okay, let's put all our knowledge into improving this, putting this technology in a platform that actually works for the developers.
Was there something about BitVM 1, like in your opinion, what was like the breakthrough in BitVM 1? Like what was the key thing where you're like, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? Like,
well, the fact that you could do this cut and choose, like a bisection search within the Bitcoin transactions and moving state within, from one transaction to the other. Like,
right.
I know that the Lamport signature concept was something that was discussed in the forums, but I just missed that. Like, I learned about that in the BitVM white paper. I said, oh, you can do that? Oh, yes. And that's
fantastic. Know if anyone prior to Robin and Super Testnet, I don't know if anyone was talking about Lamport signatures for state transitions at that point. I think that was like I think that was their contribution. I think that's kind of what they did.
Maybe. I think, maybe.
One of the many things that they did.
Yeah, totally.
But that was a huge, Robin,
I read it on the BitVM paper. And I knew about Lamport signatures. This is a very old cryptography technology. It's not something new for someone.
Right, but computers use it in all sorts of ways, and
it's not very much used because we currently use mostly a public key cryptography that is not based on hash-based cryptography. We may use again hash-based cryptography if quantum computers are ever created, right?
We'll see. Another story for another time.
Yes. So yeah, for me it was fascinating, and very later than we learned that we started looking at Robin's design of the CPU, and the first BitVM 1 thing, and was a CPU that could run any program. I very much like the idea of general purpose contracts, but he took some design decisions. We thought, hey, we could do better with some other design decisions. It was just a matter of the flavor. And we started working on that design. The same as Super Testnet, he made his own toy processor.
That's right.
So each one was making his own.
Everyone was making their own flavor of BitVM 1 at that time.
But then Robin dropped it. Like, he thought, okay, let's do BitVM 2. Very, very early. And we thought, yeah, we know about BitVM 2. I think we even had discussed it internally, the ideas of BitVM 2. Because
BitVM 2 was where the introduction of really like bridging implementations came into play, right?
No, that's the BitVM 2 bridge. There's some naming clash.
There's some naming challenges.
So BitVM 2 was initially the idea, instead of, doing an interactive protocol where you partition this mid-state space into halves and then cut and choose until you find the instruction or the program that misbehaves, that is invalid.
Right.
He said, okay, let's put all the mid-state on chain, and then I can resolve the dispute in just one interaction, just one round.
Right. Okay,
which is basically one extreme of the same protocol, but
it enhanced efficiency.
Yeah, I mean,
relative to BitVM,
it enhanced the round complexity. Like, you have low number of rounds, and you have this idea of permissionless challenge. What I didn't like, and I can tell you more about this. So for me, getting all this cost just to get permissionless challenge was not a good trade-off.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, they were very committed to permissionless challenging.
Yes.
And so that's why they were willing to jump through all these hoops.
So from my experience on breaches, I know that, and from the Blockstream paper of 2012, I know that all breaches, essentially the ones that are based on proof of work, they need to have a proof and a counterproof. You need to have these two things.
So the concept of permissionless challenging is kind of irrelevant.
Yes.
Which, by the way, they did come around on BitVM 3.
Yes.
Liam Egan said to me at dinner the other night, the BitVMX guys were right. It's kind of irrelevant, this permissionless challenge thing, because ultimately it kind of ends up being the same in the end. It's going to end up having effectively permissioned functionality at the end.
The one that you can restore the permissionless setting is once you have covenants and anyone will be able...
Then it will be different.
Yeah, that would be really different, but because anyone would be able to provide maybe a counterproof for their own.
Right.
We have to see how this can be engineered, but with certain opcodes, we really can do that.
Are you excited about any? What's your dream covenant? I ask everyone this question. I ask everyone this question.
It's the same. Almost anyone is good. Like we can discuss about template verify and the benefits. From my perspective, I can live with anyone. I can abstract any of the complexities if it's recursive. If it's recursive, it's even better. But if it's not recursive, it's equally good. So
just give us a covenant, basically, is your point of view.
Yes.
We'll figure it out from there.
Surely there are experts. I'm not longer consider myself an expert on the details of different covenants. There's so many smart people like Peter Wool, you mentioned, they know every single detail, why this, or Gregory Maxwell, why this could be better. Yeah, they will discuss it, and I trust fully that they will come up with the best covenant. Okay. For me, it's more about the functionality.
Just get one. Just get a covenant. Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting. So Robin moves to BitVM 2 in large part because he wanted to have this permissionless challenging functionality, but it that means the bridges were going to be more expensive. Most folks in the industry kind of went along, joined the BitVM Alliance, contributed to BitVM 2. You were like, no, we don't want to have our users pay those extra costs. We don't think this is a worthwhile trade-off. And BitVMX is effectively a continuation of BitVM 1.
You could say that. Yes.
Is that fair? Are there meaningful...
We changed the design. We have a different memory consistency checks. We do not do this Merkle tree because we thought being simple on chain is more important. So we completely changed the memory consistency checks and some other things. We choose a particular CPU architecture, which is RISC-V, which has obviously reduced opcodes and that we could execute on chain in less than a few kilobytes of script. So many decisions that made us go to that path. But you can say that conceptually it's a continuation of CP1.
So you have this you made these specific design choices. You kind of forged your own path, arguably, in terms of the technical architecture of your sort of BitVM, of BitVMX, this BitVM implementation. I guess we could call it that. Also, your business model is quite different than these other BitVM companies. And I'm curious if you could share maybe a little bit about that.
Yeah, bootstrapping a whole layer 2 and creating your own ecosystem, your own users, that's so much effort.
Huge.
I went through this with Rootstock. I think we finally did it. We have our own community, but this is a 10 years project.
Right.
Maybe times are now accelerating. Maybe now it's not 10 years. Maybe it's 5 years. But it's a huge effort. And I'm not sure which is the best technology for a layer 2. If it's rollups or the sidechains will be still dominating in 10 years. I really don't know which one will be. I don't want to take part choose one and create certain thing now. I just want to see all the potential technologies that we can build, because let's say you launch your L2 now with BitVM 2, you will have to BitVM 3 or BitVMX Garbled, which is kind of similar to BitVM 3, will probably replace it in 1-2 years. So if you're stuck with a certain technology, maybe it's not the best choice. For us, it's more about bringing the best possible technology and joining forces with every one of these L2s, trying to help them to come with their own design. Each one of these L2 has their own, bridge with their own, properties and connecting to their own L2, which needs basically different requirements. And so I think that the position where you can contribute more and learn more at this point is being just helping everyone.
You just kind of feel like you just want to be in sort of general building research. You don't want to make a big bet is sort of what it sounds like. Put a ton of effort and a ton of energy into something that might not end up being the relevant choice. I mean, is that a sort of a fair way to put it?
Yeah. And obviously, I must acknowledge and I must thank the contributions to that the first contributors to our own work, which are Rootstock Labs and also Cardano, that invested in this technology, because without them, we wouldn't be able to create a whole platform, right?
So let's drill down on that a little bit. So your business model is not like many of these others. You're not creating a roll-up with your own execution environments where you'll have to build your whole ecosystem from scratch. Your model is essentially creating functionally the bridging technology modularly that then other execution environments and other ecosystems can use to bridge into Bitcoin?
Yeah. So what is happening now is like every single of these L2s is creating their own code base that has essentially the same models, but tailored for their use, and they are not interoperable. Like when you build a bridge, you need a lot of components. You need a Bitcoin transaction monitor, a component that does the fee bumping and follows the transaction, a model that detects fraud and reacts to fraud. You need a key manager to store your one-time and snort keys. You need a model to build to do the setup, and then you need a light client. So there are a lot of models. Like the verification technology is only a small part of it.
Right. It sounds like you're talking about like basically bridging as an enterprise solution.
Yeah. So we wanted to create a platform that we could create many bridges. Like if you, and even if you plug in a different verification technology, let's say you want to replace the BitVMX CPU with BitVMX Garbled circuits, or with Glock, or with BitVM3, the BitVM Alliance version of BitVM3.
Right.
Then you would just plug it into BitVMX platform, and you have it for free, like the same interface. You have this different challenge engines.
So interesting. Okay, so I would so this sort of business model of basically doing modular bridging. How do you make money off of that, right? I mean, like, what's the sort of ultimate business model of, open source technology? Is it basically like a service provision kind of business model?
Currently, for us, is the most exciting business model is organically growing the company, bringing the best talent, and solving the best problems.
But is it like companies individually hire you
to totally.
Execute this? So it's sort of like service.
Yeah,
it's
which
kind of a
company
service
has
business.
built like 3 bridges with using this technology, like 3 different bridges, 3 different designs. Like we are. I mean, it's a lot of knowledge and a lot of also a lot of engineering, and so testing tools. A lot of effort put to bring this to. So that's it's a very nice place to be with.
Interesting.
And we are making this open source.
And the first bridge that will go live on mainnet will be the Rootstock BitVMX bridge.
Probably, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you have any alpha on when that's coming or when that will be live?
In the coming month, yes.
In the coming months?
Yeah, I mean, it's
been singular.
Month, probably maybe first quarter or first month of next year.
Interesting.
So this is not my decision. This is a Rootstock community decision, but essentially it's being tested now on. It's going testnet very soon. So it's a reality, right?
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I'll be curious. So it sounds like you're hopeful that do you think there's going to be just tons of sidechains who are going to be driving demand for these platform services? Or do you think, are there growth models beyond this at some point? What if we have 5 canonical rollups and you have 5 clients using this thing?
Well, there are several things here. First of all, bridge is not the only use cases for this. One of the things that we make sure when we created a platform is use case agnostic. Like the bridge is just one use case, but you can create, for instance, channel factories for Lightning.
Interesting.
And you can create a smart contract execution for ARC exit. If you are in ARC and you have smart contracts in ARC and you want to exit to Bitcoin because the server is down, you could do that with BitVMX. There are many.
So you're
other...
thinking about this kind of like a general purpose proving system.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only that. We will have. There is a paper we are working on, and this is I'm kind of pre-announcing it. We are working on a covenant system for Bitcoin based on the same security assumption of 1 of n, which will bring new use cases. For instance, Bitcoin DAOs that can be fully automated. Like you could set the rules of these Bitcoin DAOs and execute them on chain based on, hard programmable rules.
Wait, so you were saying that you could use garbled circuits. There's a protocol that you could build using garbled circuits right now with no soft fork to affect covenants, essentially.
Under the 1 of n security paradigm, yes.
Wow.
So you could basically pay to third parties with proving, with zero knowledge proof, proving that you are under the rules of the protocol, for instance.
When will that paper be dropping?
Probably before the end of the year.
Before the end of the year.
But this is a pre-announcement. It's not my kind of thing. But
interesting.
But because I talked about this in these days, I will. It's already public. Yeah.
This is awesome. Okay, well, I'm watching you guys. Again, this week I was really struck by you because, of course, not to pat myself on the back, but, I thought I knew all the sexy BitVM companies in the space. And then, I come here and I realize, oh, wow, this is one to watch. And I know you have many kind of interesting clients that you're working with.
Yeah.
I know Alpen's working with you guys. Tetrea uses your tech. I mean, I was very impressed this week.
Yeah. So one of the things like working behind the scenes with the technologies, like we don't need to advertise because we already know our clients and they already know who we are and what we do.
Right.
So we don't have this,
you don't need to be mass market.
Yes,
it's like BD with the people who need to know.
We don't have a token. We don't need anyone to buy anything from us.
Yeah.
Apart from the people that we know for a long time. Many of these people that we have relations with, we know them from a long time. So it's more about they know who we are. They come to us with very interesting problems, and we solve them.
Wow. You're the if you know BitVM fixers.
Thank you.
This was super fun. Thank you so much.
Thanks
this was
to you,
awesome. I really
Isabel.
appreciate it.
Very nice to be here.